that was going on out at World Trade Center 7. The iron cuts go straight across, straightest distance, fastest distance between 2 points is straight, and they're very clean cuts. So then we also have these other examples of angled cuts throughout the steel in World Trade Center 7. Excuse me, on all three buildings. Now, how would somebody be able to get into the World Trade Center without all the occupants knowing and place these charges? Well, it turns out that the elevators are immediately adjacent to all the core columns in the building, and that's by design. And so you have access from the hoistway shafts, which are surrounded by a couple of layers of 5/8" sheetrock for their fire protection, which simply needs to be hacked through. And then the columns are also surrounded by a couple of layers of 5/8" sheetrock, probably 3 or 4 layers. And it has to be hacked through. So, and by the way, the occupants throughout this building were reporting, not all the way throughout, but we have several reports of lots of white dust that was a complaint. So it turns out that ACE Elevator was modernizing the elevators in the 9 months prior to 9/11. So a team would have had complete access without awareness of the occupants of the building throughout the whole height to all of the core columns to set these charges. If they had the cooperation, of course, from security. That's a key question. We do know that Securicom took over the security about 6 weeks prior to 9/11. And Securicom is a company that, curiously enough, has on its board of directors Marvin Bush and Wirt Walker III, a Bush cousin. So I'm not pointing fingers at Bush, but I think it needs to be investigated. This is as far as we go with AE911truth.org in pointing fingers. We simply point in an area that needs to be investigated, but with a real investigation, not one that is full of compromised individuals, such as the 9/11 Commission report. Commission was. We'll get into that. Wireless detonation, of course, is a common method of setting off these charges, so you don't have to wire miles of wire. At some point, you just have to ask yourself, does this look like a collapse or an explosion? Intuitive. And you just look at it. The firemen described the ends of these beams as dripping with molten metal, which we will get to. And they're cut, as you can see, to lengths which fit the trucks. There's cutting on the site, but they didn't have to. Most of this steel was, as you can see in this photograph, cut quite conveniently to shippable lengths. There's 2,700 people that lost their lives in these collapses, if you will, and we owe it to them. Every one of us, it's our duty as a citizen to get to the truth of these collapses, and that's how we can serve the families, not by sweeping this under the rug, but by honoring the fallen by the relentless pursuit of truth. And that's what every one of us have to be about, and then spreading it. But there's no examples of top-down controlled demolition. Well, we found a couple of them. Oh, now this is getting really, how about this one? This one works. This is an example of a multi-level controlled demolition. Looks just like the South Tower, as a matter of fact, coming down. So you can engineer controlled demolitions to start anywhere you want. That's a fact. Let's look at the rapid onset of destruction then at the location of jet impact. Here in the North Tower, you'll see, first you have the ground shaking there, and the tripod on the camera shaking, which some suggest is an explosion that occurred prior to the collapse. And then you'll see a series of explosions up at the top. And I'll play this for you a couple of times. Up at the top, you see it's incredible, all of a sudden broiling black smoke right there, there, and there. And then you'll see the top of this building from the point of jet impacts reduced almost in half in height before there's a collapse then downward of the entire function. And then after 2 seconds, that even disappears, as we'll see. In other words, the building is shredding itself from the jet point. The point of jet impacts both up and down. Very, very interesting. The antenna falls 12 feet prior to the perimeter columns, and this suggests core column failure, which is not what the official story of NIST or FEMA tells us. They tell us, again, that the problem occurred out of the perimeter columns due to fire. Here's one more view where you can see the explosions wrapping all the way around, like the fireman said, like a belt, evenly. Again, our fire is an organic process. It doesn't drop all perimeter columns at once, which cause a straight down symmetrical collapse, which is what you see here. And you'll see some squibs in the thick. In fact, look at these smoke clouds. Even before the gravitational potential of this very heavy top section of the building develops, you're seeing all of this smoke. Because we're told, well, of course, you're going to have some smoke or dust from the gravel. Well, tell me if from the collapsing floor. In this violent series of explosions, tell me if this looks to you like a floor coming down or a series of independent individual explosions hurling outward. There's plenty to look at here. Here is the South Tower. You can see that the floors are exploding at 10 floors per second. That's a 10th of a second every floor. So it's actually faster than gravity up at the top. This guy turned and ran, unfortunately. You also see a different smoke. The fire is black and dark because it's oxygen starved and it's on its way out. In the case of the South Tower, when the building fell, which is also an anomaly because buildings fall when they're at their hottest, right? Well, this building was going out. The fire is going out, as you'll see, and that's after 56 minutes after the airplane hit. And all of a sudden, the collapse starts when it's actually cooling. You can see these independent explosions before the top section starts to kneel over. And you can see flashes in this particular video also. So once again, compare that to our top-down controlled demolition, where you see those explosions coming out and then up. Now, we're talking about a different kind of explosive in these two different controlled demolitions. In the case of these twin towers, we'll be talking about thermite and thermate, as you'll see, and we'll get to that, versus C4 or RDX, which are traditional explosives. Let's listen to Jim Hoffman describe the collapse of the South Tower.
It first started at Hill, but what you see if you look at it carefully is that it starts to tilt, but right about this point, the tilting stops as it's going into the dust cloud and actually starts to right itself. That contradicts the law of conservation of angular momentum, barring demolition, because the fulcrum would have been causing it to rotate faster. So the only explanation is that the entire top of the building has been shredded, presumably by demolition, and that's what caused it to stop rotating because the moment of inertia was destroyed. So the conclusion of this is that looking at the physical evidence, showing the features of demolition, proofs of demolition, and as well as, of course, the total bankruptcy of the official explanations and the fraudulence of the official investigations, leads me to conclude unequivocally that the Twin Towers and Building 7 were all deliberately destroyed through controlled demolition that was not a result of plane crashes and fires.
Well, we'll get to that. Do we have a free fall speed of collapse? Well, if you throw a billiard ball off the building, it'll hit the ground in about 9.2 seconds.